Welcome everybody. So I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review. This is going to be for Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. So I just recently watched Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back yesterday, and this movie is, like Star Wars A New Hope, easily going to get an A+. And here are my reasons why. This movie is fantastic on all levels. It stars Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo. You got Carrie Fisher back as Leia Organa. You also got Billy Dee Williams, who plays Lando Calrissian, who is one of my personal favorite characters, and a character that I happen to like a whole lot. Not much in Solo as much as I liked him in the original trilogy, but this movie starts off, you are on the planet Hoth. You see that Luke Skywalker has been missing. A lot of people in the rebellion are pretty much looking for him. They can't seem to find him or know where he's gone. Pretty much got lost outside of a ice storm in Hoth, and so Han Solo sets out to kind of go find him. Meanwhile, you've got Han Solo and Leia. They are pretty much bickering back and forth. They're no longer as invested in each other as they were in Star Wars A New Hope. She's constantly giving him, shit tests back and forth, and Han Solo's also kind of giving her shit tests as well. So Han Solo kind of agrees to go look for Luke Skywalker, even though a lot of people kind of warn him against doing so. He's pretty much like, well, if I don't go look for him, then pretty much nobody else will. He doesn't want to leave his friend behind, so he goes out there and finds Luke Skywalker. He is pretty much on the verge of death. He's suffering from hypothermia, which at this point could probably kill him. His tauntaun pretty much collapses and dies, and Harrison Ford finds his tauntaun, cuts it open, pretty much in the same vein as Leonardo DiCaprio's The Revenant, where he kind of cuts open the dead horse and crawls inside of it, which I think was a gruesome scene, but it was kind of necessary for the plot of the film, which is rather gruesome as well for The Revenant. And The Revenant kind of copied off of Star Wars, which I think was pretty cool, because while I was sitting in the theater, I'm like, oh, this is kind of like Empire Strikes Back, which it definitely was. So Harrison Ford pushes Luke Skywalker's body inside of the dead tauntaun. You also got, before that, Luke Skywalker, he wakes up inside of a cave, and there's this big giant Yeti looking creature inside of it with him. He cuts off his arm and pretty much escapes captivity, which kind of leads Harrison Ford to finding his body. This movie had a lot of creature effects and stuff like that, and I really do like the fact that they use practical mixed with some CGI elements with it as well. Star Wars films have always kind of, as I stated before, kind of utilized both CGI and practical effects, which is what I kind of love about movies, like when they're able to do that and make it stories a little bit better. This leads to Luke Skywalker talking about Ben Kenobi, who says that he has to go to Dagobah in order to learn and train from Yoda, which he eventually does. Yoda being the Jedi Master that we learned from the prequels and the Fall of the Jedi Order. So Luke set out to go to Dagobah, Leia staying behind to kind of work on the rebellion and trying to fight Darth Vader, who's taking power. Darth Vader invades Hoth in that cool Hoth battle with the rebellion fleet, and you see sort of the Imperial walkers for the first time, which I think was one of my most favorite scenes of all time, especially when they're kind of gunning down people and they're pretty much outmatched by these giant sort of like bipedal walkers that kind of lumber across the battlefield. Like, those things are just freaking cool, and it was kind of cool to see them back in Rogue One, just because they're pretty terrifying to people that are on the ground and trying to fight them. And even if you're playing Star Wars Battlefront, they kind of include the Imperial walkers in there as well. So it's kind of cool to see them in action and see the struggle between Luke Skywalker and the rebellion trying to take them down. And they have to devise a plan where they have to shoot these kind of cables around their feet and kind of lock them up in order to cause them to crash to the ground. Like, that scene was kind of revolutionary at its time, and I think a lot of movies borrowed that afterwards, including Avengers, Civil War, where kind of you see Peter Parker reference Empire Strikes Back. He's like, oh, you remember that old movie Star Wars, and everybody's like giving him sort of the eyeball roll and everything like that. But this leads to Luke Skywalker. He goes to Dagobah. Meanwhile, you've got Leia, Han, and Chewie. They're also on their own quest where they kind of have to go through, escape a minefield where the Imperial army is kind of chasing after them, and they escape a sort of an asteroid field. They're going after them, and they eventually get killed, and then sort of you see they back off because they know that it's kind of a stupid reason for them to chase after him in this asteroid belt. And even Han Solo says, in this movie that, it'd be stupid for them to follow us. That's when you get that scene where they kind of land inside of that creature's mouth, and then you kind of find out later that it's actually a living being and not a cave system like they thought originally. And Luke Skywalker goes to Dagobah. He meets Yoda, who pretty much tells him that he means him no harm, that he's actually here to train him. Luke Skywalker eventually finding out that it is actually Jedi Master Yoda that he's kind of working with. At first he's kind of skeptical because he's like, who's this kind of strange green creature that's pretty much following me around, and that he's trying to look for Jedi Master Yoda, as he calls him. Yoda pretty much shows him his village or his house in this sort of swamp area. He trains him in the ways of the Force, and eventually Luke Skywalker is like, I have to go save my friends, which Yoda's kind of like, if you're not patient, then that'll make you pretty much an agent of evil. I think it's one of those really cool one-liners. This movie has a lot of one-liners from Never Show Me the Odds, which Han Solo says while he's kind of flying through the minefield. And like I stated before, Darth Vader even has some one-liners, like he is as clumsy as he's stupid when he's talking to one of the Imperial admirals. You even got Sidious, who comes in later talking to Darth Vader about the fact that he knows where Luke Skywalker is and that he knows how to hunt him down. Sidious is like, I sense a great disturbance in the Force, and this pretty much leads to them going back after Luke Skywalker. There's this scene in Empire Strikes Back where Luke Skywalker is being trained by Yoda. You see that Luke Skywalker is doing sort of like all these flips and stuff, kind of like parkour movements that we would see to this day. He's also learning to sort of center his balance as well when he's kind of upside down and he's kind of like holding on by one hand and lifting rocks, which in the later movies they'll say that the Force is not just about lifting rocks and whatnot from that crappy The Last Jedi movie. That is neither here nor there. And then you see Luke Luke Skywalker, he fights off against Darth Vader, or who he thinks is Darth Vader. Luke chops off his head and everything. He thinks that he's beaten Vader, only to see that the person underneath the mask is actually Luke Skywalker. So he's like, oh shit, I just pretty much killed myself. And I think that was a very poetic moment, because everybody thinks that, oh shit, he's just beaten Vader, when in fact he has only just killed sort of a reflection of who he is on the inside. And it kind of shows that what Luke could become if he kind of joins the dark side and actually do what Yoda kind of warned against him, which is not finishing his training and actually trying to go out and save his friends who are kind of trapped in Cloud City. And that kind of leads me to talk about Cloud City. Cloud City is run by Lando Calrissian, who is this eccentric sort of billionaire and everything. He's pretty much running the show in Cloud City, and he's also making a deal with Darth Vader decide to try and capture Luke Skywalker so he can freeze him in carbonite. The way that he's going to do that is by getting Leia, Han, and Chewie and kind of drawing him into there, and eventually he does. But at this moment in time, Luke is pretty much still on Dagobah training with Yoda, and you see that really awesome sequence where they go into the dining hall. There's Vader standing there, and he's like, it would be honored if you were to join us. And then you get Han Solo firing his blaster, and then he pretty much steals the DL-44, which is one of my favorite weapons in the Star Wars universe. Lando Calrissian going, I'm sorry, like I kind of had to do this, otherwise he would pretty much take over the city and everything and pretty much force his way anyway. Lando Calrissian wanting what's best for his people, which I kind of agree with. At the time, like, he doesn't want to start a war or a conflict with anybody. He's pretty much trying to do what's best for his civilians that live within his city. And he's constantly flirting with Leia in this movie, which kind of ticks off Harrison Ford a little bit, because Harrison Ford really does have a thing for Leia Organa. He wants to date her, be her pretty much boyfriend. Leia's constantly giving him shit and constantly flirting with Lando Calrissian, who's his friend, which we all know from Solo's Star Wars story was the case. And Han Solo is not really too fond of that. He's kind of making fun of him, doing slight jabs at him whenever he does that. And it's really cool to kind of see that sort of bond and friendship between Lando Calrissian and Han Solo still having an impact on Empire Strikes Back, especially between the bond between Harrison Ford and Leia. Kind of, you see their sort of relationship grow from being Leia showing a little bit of a disinterest in him at first into actually caring about him towards the end, where you get that famous line, which I will show you guys later. Then you see Luke Skywalker, he kind of senses that his friends are in trouble in Cloud City. He goes to rescue them, only to meet the fact that Darth Vader is there, and he is pretty much almost captured by the Empire, but manages to escape when he fights off against Darth Vader. And that's where you get that really cool moment that is pretty much spoiled now for everybody, that Darth Vader, his father, and Darth Vader is actually Anakin Skywalker. Luke Skywalker being like, you told me enough, you killed him. And then Darth Vader's like, no, I am your father, which is one of the most important scenes in cinematic history. When I saw this scene as a kid, like, it blew my mind, because at first you thinking Darth Vader is just this random bad guy who's pretty badass, and then it turns out that it's actually Luke's father. Like, you're not expecting that scene to happen. I think even to this day, like, it still blows people's minds, like it did mine as a kid. So this line is really, really famous, and you get that scene where he's like, no, and he screams and he like leaps off the edge of the spire, and that's when Lando Calrissian in the Millennium Falcon, he pretty much saves the day, capturing Luke Skywalker. And you see that Luke Skywalker is wounded. He has one of his arms pretty much chopped off, because Vader pretty much did that to show him that he's got a sense of power and sense of force still within it. Luke Skywalker then gets his metal arm, and then you see sort of Luke Skywalker kiss Leia, which he doesn't really know at the time is his actual sister, which is a little bit creepy, because you later find out that it's a little bit of an incest scene, because in Return of the Jedi you find out that Leia Organa is Luke's sister and that they're both pretty much twins. So that happens, and then you get that really cool sequence where you see sort of Darth Vader. He is in charge. He's pretty much going after Luke Skywalker and trying to hunt them down, because he wants the Millennium Falcon as well as Luke Skywalker. They set a trap where they attempt to freeze Han Solo in carbonite, which they actually do, and you get that seminal moment in the movie where Leia's like, I love you, and then Han Solo's like, I know, and then they pretty much lower him into the carbonite chamber, and then you find out that he's still alive, but he's pretty much frozen in cryo sleep. Darth Vader's like, yeah, make sure that Skywalker comes to me, and that he wants to lure him in there so that he can also freeze Luke Skywalker like he did Han Solo. It does not work as planned, and Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader actually have a fight, and you see another cool line that comes in this movie where he's like, Force is strong with you, Skywalker, but you're not a Jedi yet. And he still wants Luke Skywalker to join him, but he's trying to show him, you know, that the dark side still has power over the light as well. And Luke Skywalker, being the hero that he is and part of the hero's journey, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to side with you. And he's still trying to turn his father against the dark side. Throughout this movie, as well as Return of the Jedi, he's constantly battling between Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker and trying to bring Anakin Skywalker back into fruition, but he's really not lucky in that regard until the last part of Return of the Jedi. This movie has a lot of really cool action sequences, like the asteroid field chase sequence. You see a lot of really cool fight sequences with lightsabers and stuff, more so than you do in sort of the sequel trilogy films. I don't know why that they're so afraid of using lightsabers and stuff. Like, we've seen lightsaber battles before, especially that awesome hallway sequence where Luke Skywalker is battling Darth Vader, and that's before the I am your father sequence, which has become synonymous. And like, you see like the dangerous methods that go into using these lightsabers, that they're not easy to wield, that can lap off limbs and block plasma blaster bolts and stuff like that. Like, these lightsabers are deadly weapons, and the Jedi only rarely ever use them unless they they actually have to, and sort of a Jedi's method is to use them as a defense weapon rather than for attack, which they say countless times within this movie, especially Jedi Master Yoda. He's like, use your weapons for defense, never for attack, and I highly do think that's a smart decision, a smart way to utilize lightsabers in this film as well as the future films in the franchise. So I don't know why that Lucasfilm doesn't want to use lightsabers in these movies, like especially the sequel trilogy, because if you had more lightsaber battles, and especially ones that are memorable, like you would get more people excited about the future movies, and they'd be constantly buying the toys and the properties and the lightsabers and stuff and constantly talking about the movie afterwards. Like, this movie has a lot of really cool one-liners, and like I've said countless times throughout this review, that this movie is one of my favorites, including Return of the Jedi. Like, the original trilogy is one of those trilogies that's kind of like a bookend, like each and every single film matters. You got the beginning, which is A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, which is the middle, and then Return of the Jedi, which is the end, and they all feel like they matter. Like, everybody in this movie has sort of an important part. Even sort of the minor characters later on become important within the overall story, whether that's, you know, the prequel trilogy or even the sequel trilogy. These characters matter. They're given enough screen time and enough lines to kind of make their characters important and last, you know, generations. And like, even to this day, people are still watching, you know, Empire Strikes Back. Like me, someone who grew up in the 90s, was shown the original trilogy before the prequel films. Like, even I still watch it to this day. So, and not to mention the score by John Williams returns to kind of do sort of the Empire theme, which is kind of synonymous with the dark side and everything, as well as Darth Vader. You got Luke's theme that comes back into play in this, and you got Leia and Harrison Ford, and you know, their kind of moments and stuff that they interplay with the music. Like, the sound in this movie is just amazing, and especially that asteroid chase where you see the Millennium Falcon and Harrison Ford is dodging all that. You know, you get the music kind of pumping in and everything. Like, it just kind of gives you that feeling that you're in a different place and you're a different time completely. This movie, you go to different planets and stuff. Like, first you start off in Hoth, then you go to Dagobah where Jedi Master Yoda is, and then you go back to Cloud City and stuff. Like, in the newer sequel trilogy movies, you don't really go to too many planets. You don't even visit that many unique and strange alien creatures. Like with this movie, like this movie has a sequence of this movie where they're in the mouth of that creature, like I said, in the asteroid field, and you get all these like strange bugs and creatures that kind of eventually they escape. That scene kind of terrified me as a kid. Like, you don't really have that many scenes like that in the newer sequel trilogy. So combine that with the music and the lightsaber effects and everything, and the visual effects in this movie, the use of practical and CGI, I just think that this movie is a perfect package, and anybody interested in filmmaking should definitely give The Empire Strikes Back a chance. Not to mention that the action sequences of this film are great. The story is pretty much elevated from the first movie, which everybody says Empire Strikes Back is the better movie. I kind of like A New Hope a little bit more, but you know, that's my personal bias. But I'm still going to give Star Wars Empire Strikes Back an A+. I think that if you're a fan of filmmaking, you should definitely check this out, and you should definitely watch this movie. This does deal with, you know, the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell, just because George Lucas, like I said before, was inspired by his work to kind of make Star Wars, as well as like Flash Gordon and Akira Kurosawa, and that really comes into play into these movies as well. So yeah, those are my thoughts of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. Hopefully I said a little bit enough to kind of get you guys to want to watch this movie. I figured that if I were to review this movie and kind of spoil everything for you guys, it would not be as fun as if you guys just watched it for yourself. But by now, people who are interested in Star Wars should have seen Empire Strikes Back. So hopefully you guys like this review, and as always, guys, if you like this review and want to see more in the future, please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.